Deep in the middle of the Pacific Ocean sits a ring of coral islands so remote that the nearest continent is over 3,000 miles away. These islands barely rise 6 feet above the waves, yet they support one of Earth's most pristine ecosystems: untouched coral reefs, massive seabird colonies, and crystal clear lagoons. This is Palmyra Atoll, and most Americans have never heard of it. The official story is simple. Palmyra is a protected nature reserve. Scientists study endangered species, conservation groups protect fragile habitats, access is restricted to preserve this ecological treasure. But there's another story, one that involves Supreme Court battles, World War II fortresses, and China. Because Palmyra is much more than a tropical paradise, as you are about to see. So let's start with the basics. Palmyra is a coral atoll, a ring of islands formed over millions of years as coral grew around a sinking volcano. Today, just over 4 square miles of land scattered across 50 small islands. The highest point barely reaches 6 feet above sea level. But hidden within this ring are deep natural lagoons, and this is where things get interesting. Those lagoons make Palmyra one of the healthiest marine ecosystems in the Pacific, perfect breeding grounds for fish and sharks. They also happen to provide natural deep water harbors capable of sheltering military vessels. Nature's design or perfect strategic positioning, depending on how you look at it. Palmyra sits 1,000 miles south of Hawaii, almost exactly halfway between Hawaii and American Samoa. The nearest continent is over 3,000 miles away. This isolation protects the coral reefs from pollution, fishing pressure, and human disturbance. It's why the ecosystem remains pristine. It also positions Palmyra as a mid-Pacific anchor point, equidistant from multiple strategic locations, surrounded by nothing for 1,000 miles in any direction. An unsinkable aircraft carrier that's been sitting in the perfect position for over a century. Same geography, two very different purposes. Then there's the weather. Palmyra sits in the intertropical convergence zone, where northern and southern hemisphere trade winds collide. This creates 175 inches of rain annually. That's nearly 15 feet of rain every single year. The constant rainfall creates dense rainforest and feeds nutrients into the lagoons, sustaining that pristine ecosystem. Perfect for biodiversity. It also creates year-round cloud cover, natural interference for radar and satellite surveillance, the kind of weather that makes remote operations harder to detect. You're starting to see the pattern. Every geographic advantage for nature is also a geographic advantage for military operations. So when did the United States realize what it had? December 7th, 1941. Before World War II, Palmyra was privately owned. In 1922, a Honolulu family named Fuller Leo bought the entire atoll for just $15,000. They wanted a copra plantation, a tropical retreat. For nearly 20 years, that's exactly what it was: private paradise. Nobody paid much attention. Then Pearl Harbor was attacked, and within days, the U.S. Navy seized Palmyra. What happened next proved everything about its strategic value. Naval construction battalions, the Seabees, transformed this pristine coral atoll into a military fortress in a matter of months. They dredged deep channels through the coral reefs to allow warship passage. They blasted and paved long runways across islands. They built causeways connecting separate landmasses. At its peak, over 6,000 troops were stationed on this tiny speck of land. Palmyra became a stationary aircraft carrier, a refueling hub for operations across the Pacific Theater, and important enough that a Japanese submarine considered it worth attacking, shelling the island on December 24, 1941. When the war ended, the Fuller Leo family wanted their island back. The government refused. The family sued. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and here's what matters. The United States government fought for years through multiple courts to keep a worthless coral atoll in the middle of nowhere. In 1947, the Supreme Court sided with the family in United States v. Fuller Leo. The family won their property back. But even after losing, the government designated Palmyra as a naval defensive sea area, a military restriction that remains in effect to this day, 84 years later. They lost the legal battle, but never surrendered military authority over the waters and airspace. Fast forward to the year 2000. The Nature Conservancy, one of the world's largest environmental organizations, purchased Palmyra from the Fuller-Leo family for $30 million, the most expensive conservation acquisition in history. Today, it's officially managed as a National Wildlife Refuge by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Only 4 to 20 people are allowed on the island at any time, scientists conducting ecological research. Even American citizens can't simply visit. You need special permits that are rarely granted. The official reason? Environmental protection. Any human presence risks introducing invasive species that could devastate this pristine ecosystem. But here's what most people don't know. Palmyra remains designated as a Naval Defensive Sea Area under Executive Order 8682, continuously in effect since February 14, 1941. That means the Secretary of the Navy still controls access to the waters and airspace around the atoll. Compare this to Wake Island and Johnson Atoll, also part of the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument. Those territories are still directly managed by the Department of Defense. Military control is obvious. Palmyra is the only one transferred to civilian conservation management. Why? Because conservation provides the perfect cover. There's no permanent civilian population, which means military flexibility is maintained. Access restrictions are justified by environmental protection. Nobody questions keeping people away to protect endangered seabirds and coral reefs. But here's what most people don't know. The military never left. On February 14, 1941, before Pearl Harbor was even attacked, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8682. It designated Palmyra as a Naval Defensive Sea Area. That order has never been rescinded. 84 years later, it's still in effect. What does that mean? It means the U.S. Navy still controls who can enter the waters and airspace around Palmyra. Not scientists, not conservationists, the Navy. And here's the interesting part. Look at Wake Island and Johnson Atoll, 2 other remote U.S. territories in the Pacific. They're also protected as part of the same Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument. But those islands are openly managed by the Department of Defense. Military control is obvious. Palmyra is different. It's the only one transferred to civilian conservation management. The only one where military control isn't immediately visible. Why? Because conservation provides the perfect justification. No permanent population means no civilians to evacuate if tensions escalate. Access restrictions mean nobody questions why outsiders are kept away. And environmental protection is beyond criticism. Nobody argues with protecting endangered species. But make no mistake, underneath that conservation mission, the military never gave up control. They just stopped advertising it. And that control matters more today than it did in 1941. Under international law, Palmyra gives the United States control over 350,000 square kilometers of Pacific Ocean. That's an area larger than Germany, not land, ocean. Exclusive fishing rights, mineral extraction rights, military navigation control. It's not about the 4 square miles of coral, it's about the 135,000 square miles of water around it. Palmyra sits in what military planners call the Third Island Chain, America's deepest defensive line in the Pacific. First island chain, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines. Second island chain, Guam and the Marianas. Third island chain, Hawaii, Palmyra, American Samoa. These aren't just islands, they're anchor points, and as tensions rise between the United States and China over Taiwan, every single one becomes more valuable. If conflict breaks out and forward bases like Guam come under attack, Palmyra sits 1,000 miles behind the front lines, perfect for resupply, perfect for staging long-range operations, perfect for dispersed basing. Spreading assets across multiple locations so an enemy can't take them all out at once. And here's the irony. While China spends billions of dollars building artificial islands in the South China Sea, Islands that face legal challenges and structural problems, America already owns Palmyra. Natural, established, legally uncontested. It's been sitting there the entire time. The island serves both purposes perfectly. Real conservation protects a priceless ecosystem, real military authority maintains strategic flexibility. They're not contradictory, they're complementary. And if Pacific tensions escalate tomorrow, that Naval Defensive Sea Area designation means the US military can reassert direct control immediately, just like they did in 1941. So when you see Palmyra Atoll on a map, that tiny dot labeled as a nature reserve that nobody can visit, understand what you're really looking at. You're looking at 135,000 square miles of controlled Pacific Ocean, a node in America's defense network, and potentially a decisive factor in a future conflict with China. 2 stories, 1 island, both completely true. So here's the question. How many other nature reserves are actually strategic assets? How many times has conservation been the perfect cover for military control? And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and activate the bell for more True Geo stories. Thank you for watching it, and see you in the next one.